Art, love to have you on, man. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure being here. Looking forward to getting into it.
So let's dive right into it. I'd love to. I mean, we're talking to entrepreneurs from the area. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story prior to joining FormHero. Obviously, we'll get into FormHero, but I noticed that you'd founded a few companies and been involved in some executive teams. So let's talk about MXD communities. Let's talk about your road here. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I don't think you and I have ever talked about that.
No, I don't think we have. And I tell this story. I usually tell it in joking or in trying to motivate people on the lessons they're about to learn from failures. So, no, I think
Always important.
yeah, it is. It's super important. Like
Yeah.
a lot of my stories that I tell, especially coaching up young staff and young people, is about all the things I did wrong. Like it's a quick tangent, but I think I tell the story of the first. It was actually a part of MXD communities. I'll tell you about it. It's mixedrace.com was the primary property, but I remember building it. I'll tell you about what it was in a second. But when I built it, I was moved into my parents' basement. Classic story. Working away at it. Worked for about 3 or 4 months building the source code. This was early 2000s. I bought myself my first CD burner, and my computer was running really slow. And so I'm like, I'm going to back everything up. I'm going to burn it on a CD. Then I'm going to format the computer. And it was my first CD burner. So once I burnt it, I took the CD and I scratched into the top of it. I wrote over in pen again and again, very important backup. But what I didn't know is you're just scratching the disk. And then I formatted the hard drive of the computer. So I erased all the other copy of it and then reinstalled everything. I went to put that CD in and it could never be read again. And that was about 4 months of, I was a sole employee. That's all I had been working on. I deleted all of it. No cloud, no anything. And I poured myself a drink. I was like 21 years old, poured myself a drink, went to sleep, woke up the next morning and just started building it again. And I think that's the mentality that you have to have. Like I couldn't dwell on it. I still believed in what I was doing and I had a chance to do it a little bit better the second time. And that's it. Like that's the quality that I know has served me well. And so what that was early days of social networking, pre-Facebook, basically pre-MySpace. I was building social networks, and the belief at the time was that niche social networks were the way to go. So I had mixedrace.com. There was a lot of ethnic-based sites. There was Asian Avenue, Mi Gente, Black Planet, and mixedrace.com was kind of a place where I was encouraging everybody to come together. And I built a lot of cool things. I built messaging, like real-time instant messaging in like 2000 that you could do on the site. I built a hot or not profile. I built all kinds of things that independently went on to become their own stuff. And I was there before Facebook building these social networks. So I like to joke, if there was a list of 50 people that could have been Facebook, I was there. I had about 700,000 members on my site.
Wow.
In the early 2000s. But I spent a lot of time building pop-up and pop-under ads. And a lot of time monetizing and living a great life while Facebook came along and focused on the user and the money later, and they seem to have won that one.
Wow, what a story. And I think it's so important, and we always talk about on this show a little bit of the entrepreneurial road and how difficult it can be, because there's this kind of conception out there that it's all about just having the idea, and the idea just, well, you just have the right idea, like Facebook at the right time. But what we're really discovering is it's more about how do you react to the inevitable setbacks. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the setbacks. It's where do you put your time? Do you invest in people? Like that was another one. I was in my early 20s. I was getting some nice checks in the mail, ad revenue. And I wasn't investing in people. I'm like, why would I hire people? I just get checks in the mail. This is great. And like I learned those lessons about like it was a cool tech, it was a cool product, but I didn't think about scaling it and making myself less valuable to it, and making other people pick that up. And those are lessons that I'm glad I learned then. And some people don't make those mistakes even at 20, but I did, and I needed to make them.
Yeah, I think it's so much more common to have the mistakes all the way to the success rather than just the instant idea that takes you there, right?
Exactly.
And then with Interface, where you were doing marketing, I just find that transition interesting. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that before we dive into
no, it was an interesting company. I know the founder, it was a founder led, but it was not like it wasn't on the typical VC or scale path. So it's a Canadian company. I think he's been in business for almost 20 years now. And I actually was hired as a developer. And I think it's another story I tell everybody. But it was a few weeks in, there was someone that wanted to transition out of a role that they were in, doing customer demos and doing, like basically sales engineering. And they said, hey, if you know someone, like if we hire someone, I can move on to a different role. And I looked at it and I said, after having been a founder, I just didn't have a resume to get myself a better job at the time. I said, you know what, like I could do this while still being a developer. It'll probably make me a better developer to see what the client is saying. And that led me to like becoming the head of their, that training and kind of product management of training services, and then ultimately into the marketing team and working my way up. And I think it's because the founder recognized that I was a founder. He had an employee that was I just cared about the business. I didn't have another gear. So I was always going to look for ways to automate whatever I was doing out of it, automate myself out of a job, improve something, clean up after myself. And I always joked that it was this job that someone else didn't want and was, wanted to get out of, was the job that took me, that was literally in my second week. And within a year or two of there, I was a product manager, and another year I was like a VP. So this thing that someone didn't want was the biggest catalyst for my career in terms of advancing up with my skill. Don't get me wrong. There's some of me in there too, but yeah, so it was, I went from in that place from a developer to solution engineer into marketing and ultimately the executive team. And he's still going strong. It's a solid business. I think I always found that one funny. He's been doing it for 20 years, profitable, but it's still categorized as a lifestyle business. And I found that in my early intro to like, what is a lifestyle business? Pretty funny.
So what brought you from, was it just because they needed it on the marketing side? Like what brought you from the more working on the dev product side to end up being more?
They needed it. And I started looking at, it was a technical product and it didn't have their sales team, a lot of the sale was still being the sales engineer. And then and along the way, I just kept creating content and creating, new avenues to improve what I was doing or to improve who I was working with. And I think he just saw that it was a role that was needed. So then, just built that trust up to go into that. And it was still it's a small place. So it wasn't the most sophisticated marketing, but it was more product marketing initially, and then branching out into some of the other areas. But no, it was just, like I said, I was a developer because I happened to have that skill more than the other skills, but I was a founder, which meant I had done everything. So the developer was just my entry in, and then I couldn't help get my tentacles everywhere.
And it's a great road path into your current role now as a co-founder and chief growth officer, right? You'd already done a little bit of everything. And so now, let's talk a little bit about how FormHero began and a little bit about that backstory. Would love to hear it.
So FormHero, it's one of the things that I'm probably, I don't know if I'm happiest to admit, but I will, it's interesting for me as someone that is always kind of like driven by my own ideas, and I've been a founder and I tried a bunch of other little startups along the way. This was not my idea at all. This was Ryan. I give him full credit. And as my wife said, that's because he has better ideas than you. She says it very lovingly. When I retell it, it sounds a lot worse.
Lots of love in there.
Yeah, totally love it there. But no, so Ryan, the idea actually came out of a bad experience for him. And what it was he, they had the sudden passing of his mother-in-law. And, during he was already in a position where he was looking for a startup idea. He had got a package from his last place, and they were at the funeral home, and the funeral director introduced him to a service. And it's a service for, when you have a loved one pass away, what you don't realize is for the next couple of years, documentation and paperwork is going to chase you and follow you around. You're going to get letters of renew your alumni subscription, or what do you want to do about your air miles? And so they have a service where they will call you up and they'll interview you, and they'll say, like, tell me about your mother-in-law. And it's very personal. It's like, oh, did she go to university or did she go to school? Oh, what school did she go to? Was she part of the alumni? Was she, where did she shop? Did she shop at Sobeys or, whatever the stores are? And what they're doing is they're building a binder of all of the standard documents that you need to cancel your subscription, move your points from one organization to another. And then they mail you a binder with little stickies of all the places you need to sign and the pre-stamped envelopes to package it all up and get it out there and to clean up what would have been a nightmare across all of these processes, across all these enterprises. And so Ryan, I think he jokes that his wife looked at him while the director was describing this, and she said, "You have a business idea, don't you?" And he was like, yes, I know it's weird, but I at a funeral home, but I do. And so that was kind of the catalyst, where he had always worked in large enterprises, knew the security that was stopping them from taking on new things, had tried to generalize and standardize how processes and documents were generated. And he just knew that like there's something here to bring this to scale for any process, not just these one-time activities like a death or one-time activity like your taxes, but to build these experiences where you could guide people through what the bureaucracy and allow them to just be done with it, and then deliver whatever needed to be, whether it's a document, whether it's an integration, give the business what they need to do their part, but don't force the client into like downloading and printing and filling out all of these, forms. So that was a catalyst. And then Ryan brought me in. He tried to get me earlier on. I thought he was just asking for free help as a previous founder. I pushed him off a few times, and I was like, I'm trying to work on my own thing, but here's a couple ideas. And then he came back to me later on, and that was when my wife said, no, this is the best idea that I've ever heard. You need to go do this. And that was when I said, okay, this is happening. Let's take on the risk again, and let's do it.
Wow. And so, yeah, I mean,
sorry, I talk a lot. I know, I can't help it.
No, it's a great story, and I love that your wife kind of said, "All right, not only is this a really good idea, but you have to get involved." Right.
Yeah, and she's a conservative one, so when she says that, then you know that like, okay, this is a legitimate thing, because normally she's like, I don't know.
So, I mean, I've known you guys for a while now. We were in the same Rev cohort. I've seen the growth, and what I really was excited to get you on to talk about today, because you're in charge of the entire revenue operations side at FormHero, and you guys went enterprise sales early. So I would love to dig into the very beginning, which is founder-led sales. So many different points to jump into on here, but I guess the first one is, Chad and I are hearing a lot now, like you get more technical founders and they will try to hand things off to, like, we just need to hire a salesperson right away. Were you tempted to do that? Did you kind of know better immediately? And what would you say to folks that are looking to do that? Like, what was your background to doing those initial sales? Both of you together?
I would say, no, I don't think we were tempted to do it right away. We, part of it was because we were not headed down the VC track. We wanted to believe that we could grow a solid business. And even when I came on board full-time, Ryan had already got shown through the ecosystem here in Canada, and some of the incubators and accelerators had already shown that there was an interest. So what we learned early on, and it's a little bit of step back, but we would, like any other startup, we'd go talk to VCs and they would say, forms, I don't care. Why is this important? And then we would go talk to anybody that would listen at a bank. And so sometimes it was at, events like at Communitech where we had kind of met from before, a DMZ here in Toronto, an innovation team, or someone doing a tour of innovation from one of the big banks. And we talked to them and they would immediately say like, oh yeah, this is a huge problem. Like, this would be good. And so that was when we knew we had a real business. And it was always that funny thing of, we were selling something that was a today change, a pragmatic solution to a problem. The VCs, some of those other people weren't seeing it because they were looking at, like AI and 5 years down the road. And so we saw early on that like all that we need to do to sell it is actually get in front of people. And so it wasn't about trying to, we made some of those mistakes. I remember my first week, I was trying to build drip campaigns and just like generic things. And I'm like, everyone's just going to flood in. And that wasn't the case. But it was network based. It was just go talk, go show every single person that would look at it, show them a demo, show them, customize a demo, put time in to like make it unique for them. And we just saw that like, we just had that weird blind confidence. Like we thought we could win a couple of the big banks when it was just the two of us, and we hadn't even, the product was still being worked on, and we did, which is weird, even weirder than the belief that we could do it. And so it wasn't about thinking we could just get a salesperson right away. It was just thinking about, how can I just go show people if what I have is valuable, and if I'm having a real conversation with them, they'll listen. And then it's going to be about helping them understand what's their block from actually giving up some money. And that's usually fear of giving this money to such a small company.
Yeah, for sure, especially at the enterprise level with larger financial services customers. I mean, they're so highly regulated. There's so much information security audits and all of this other stuff. It can be really daunting. So I always found your story of managing to not only get in front of them, but win these big contracts and then consistently build upon them, right? Because it tends to be a services engagement initially, but then you grow upon it. It's how these early stage enterprise sales work. I mean, and how did you get to those first few meetings? The accelerators, it sounds like they helped. The outreach to get to because you have to get to a high enough level to have them take it seriously, right? It's not enough to get to a small, disparate business unit alone if you're going to affect real change in there. So, would love to hear you walk through kind of one of those cycles.
Yeah, and again, I can't promise that it's repeatable. Sometimes you do get lucky, but I obviously it worked out for us. And so I think, again, more credit to Ryan. He laid a lot of the groundwork. And what it was, we have a product, I wouldn't talk about it, but our platform lets you take those processes like we saw at the funeral home, but very different, take those and rapidly turn them into digital experiences, right? That guide an employee or a customer through it. So a couple of the banks, we had the opportunity, one through a next big idea in fintech. So there was a program that was being run out of one of the accelerators, and we didn't, we got in because we had met them at another like collision event. So they had met us and they said, these guys have a pretty cool thing. So we got to be one of the 5 finalists. And again, our differentiator there was that while everyone was competing to be the biggest idea in fintech, we were knocking on doors and finding someone to run a pilot with. And so we actually came third in the judging of the next big idea in fintech, but we were the only ones that actually ran a live pilot collecting applications on behalf of the bank during the contest. And it was paid. So we made more money in the pilot than we would have made winning the contest. And we earned credibility, and we earned, it was all about, can you impact change? Because they're used to IT cycles and budgets that are so big and so slow. We needed to get in there and demonstrate that we could, at every meeting, every opportunity, we would move something further. We'd come back with a refined demo. We'd come back and say, well, but here it is. We're not talking about should we're talking about what would need to change to use this. So we always took that mentality of show it fast, and change the conversation from, well, maybe, to, okay, well, this is everything we want, but you need to grow, or you need to be, you need to go through security or audit or whatever it is. But the question of, is this valuable, went away. And then with that was a smaller deal. The first big enterprise RFP we won was, we went and we built business cases with 2 or 3 different little business units. Then we started having champions at a growing digitization department. And ultimately, when they saw 2 or 3 or 4 business units all saying, hey, I want to use this little thing, they said, well, we should consider centralizing that and going out to RFP to the big players to figure out who could win it. And so that's what happened. We were so close to winning one of those little deals, and it drove us crazy when they turned it into an RFP. But in that RFP, we were up against the biggest, technology companies in the world. And it was 2 of us. And we did the same thing where we made sure we delivered every day. There was a demo, there was a new thing to see. They could play with it, they could try it. And that was the difference. I think we were the only ones that actually did that. The other companies went in with the typical sales of like, here's a rendering of what it might look like. And we went in with, here, it's done. What do you want to change? And I think we were told that every representative of every line of business, we won hands down. And then it became, how can we give these guys money? They are so small. They actually said to us, I don't know how I'm going to give this to a 10-person company. And we said, we're a 2-person company. And so that's the other one. And I know I'm not letting you get a lot of questions in, but we say this every day. We say it to every new hire. We say it to everyone else, is transparency is so important. These organizations, all that risk and all the fear they have, if they catch you in a lie, if you claim to be something you are not, you will ruin that credibility and you will not get back. But if you are upfront and you say, hey, there's a gap here, but here's our plan to mitigate that, or we need money from you to mitigate that or to fill this out, that is a better position than saying like, no, we got this, and then you don't have it. That they can't handle that. And that's been our secret sauce, is being fast and being honest every step of the way to a fault.
Yeah, I would climb back on the transparency piece too, because I've seen it as well in financial services in areas like New York and Toronto. Even if you go in, and I've heard so many horror stories of small companies going in and promising they could do things with a demo that was a YouTube video basically,
Yes.
and vaporware, and big banks getting burned, and they've been burned before and they're looking out for it. And I've been honest in situations and lost an immediate deal, but I've had people call me back and say, you were one of the only people in our process that said what your limitations were. We remembered you. And now we have something that you told us exactly what you'd be a fit for. We remembered that and we're calling you for it. And then want to deal later. It's
I think
critical.
The one thing I'd add, because I learned this, we did learn this with one of the early clients, and we had earned enough credibility to get over this. But I learned there was a time where they had budgeted 4 months for implementation. And, we're really proud of being agile and how, great we are. So we said, no, 4 months, that's crazy. We can be done in a month. And they said, okay, are you sure? And then they committed to that month-long timeline. And then close to a month, we called them up and we said, hey, listen, it doesn't look like we'll hit a month. It'll be about a month and a half. And at the time in our minds, we were like, yeah, but you thought it was going to be 4 months and now it's a month and a half. Isn't that a huge win? But they were explaining to us, and I knew this, but I just needed to hear it again, that it didn't matter. Like, what they need is certainty. So once we told them 1 month, they built up the machinery that happens after we hand it over to them. And to undo that was going to cause all kinds of pain. So it wasn't about, they cared less about, could you do it in 1 month versus 4 months? They want to know when you make a date, you are committed to that. And that was an important lesson to learn, that, it's not always about the fastest, the coolest, the whatever. It's also about just your word and understanding how they operate and being able to support them within that.
I'd love to break this down into something a little bit more actionable as well for founders that I've talked to, because this is so difficult, right? Where you're in a 2-person, and in a lot of cases it's 2 co-founders. You're making your very first sales and trying to go out, in some cases, fundraise off of any revenue that you can get. And it's just terrifying. And you do have to have this, it's almost this mentality that comes first before anything, that I'm going to go for it. And the thing that I always remembered about you and FormHero was seeing that you had immediately just shot for the top of some of these places. And we're talking executive level EVP meetings at major banks right away. No director level contacts, no slow 1.5 year burn, because you just don't have time for that. But I'd love to hear about, I guess, how you got that mindset and what you would say to somebody who's thinking about reaching out, and where do they need to go in the organization? Should they actually just go to the president of technology or an executive right away? Can they do that?
Yeah, it's a good point. So part of it comes from stupidity, and that's on me. And I've always been, I told you about, like, I've always just had this lack of fear around those things. And so I'm an experimenter. I'm like, hey, I'm going to try it. I don't expect it to work, and sometimes it does, though. But what I learned is it's not for everybody. If you know that audience, if because what's going to happen, right? If you reach out to that high executive, most likely you're not going to hear back from them, but they might punch you to someone below them to vet you. But occasionally they might actually, maybe get them at the right time. I had one of the large insurance companies here. I did get their Canadian CEO on the phone very early on. And then there was a fire alarm in the building, and I was literally having to be like, can you hold while I go down the fire escape?
That's an amazing story.
Oh yeah. It's brutal. But that's the catch, is that you need to know, I kind of go to, like, I don't want to encourage a lot of my own people to do it. When I would do it, it would be that I know that I'm not going to waste their time. I know that I'm not going to be salesy to them. I'm trying to just either be like, I think I have something for you. I want to spend 10 minutes with someone to vet it. Like, kind of, who do you trust? And even if I do get them directly, I'm going to have a genuine thing that says, like, I'm here. I want to work for you. I want to help you. Here's the only things I need to know. And let me prove to you that I'm something. But I'm not trying to get an executive on to do a discovery call to, tell them the backstory of here's how banking is changing. Like they're the executive of the bank. They're the ones writing that research or, being researched on to tell you where it's going. So there are times like they're still business owners. And that's how I always approach it, that they're a business owner or a unit owner who if what I have is genuinely, has the potential to make a significant impact on what they're doing, then I don't mind trying to do it if I can back it up. But I always took that approach that like, every meeting, I've never been scared of anyone. I've met I've met some of the most senior people at the biggest banks, and they're still people. But I don't want to be a jerk to them, and I don't want to be a sales guy to them. But I will reach out if I feel that it's appropriate. The same way that if a lot of people will do it if they've got traction, and that might be who you're updating on the status of the deal or how your teams are working together. But yeah, I would do it because I needed to cut some corners. I didn't have time to wait. And as I said, the success rate wasn't high, but I also never did it in a way that would burn my bridge. So I didn't want them to, if I failed, I didn't want them to be like, wait, or sorry, when I did succeed and someone else brought the contract up to them, I did not want them to be like, wait, that's that guy that cold called me every day for 17 weeks. Never want to be in that position. But, if I really think that I can help your claims ratio at an insurance company on this and this and this, and I need to talk to Jane to make that happen, then I'm going to put that out there because they want to hear it. And they'll, again, please don't everybody listen to this, go email every CEO. It's a terrible idea. But in the right context, it can be done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to reach out to the top, but as a founder, you have to have that belief that you're adding value, and you have to have something to back it up, which if you're inventing something completely new, you do, but you just have to relay that. And I've seen this too, because we had to do it as well. And I have seen, a quote unquote bad case scenario is they kick you down to their P&L guy or, another VP at the organization who'd still be an incredible champion for you. But I think there's this fear of, no, I have to do it at that lower level. And for FormHero, if you just think about what your product is, you were always going to be enterprise. So that this is always where you guys were going to have to go. So it just made sense.
It did. And the only thing I would say is like those first couple of deals, that's not what we did. So we put in the legwork to know where we were making change at the organization, where, what the pain points were, that we actually were enterprise scale change makers. So it was that like, I wouldn't be like, I've got an MVP. I think this might be cool. Do you got time to like come over to my garage and see this thing? No, we were still the size of in my garage, but we had a couple of referenceable sites and a couple of clients and enough conversations under our belt to know that I can have a serious conversation about what they were doing and the technology that they had and how this could make a difference.
Right.
That's my break point, right?
A lot of the first reach outs can be just, look, I'm just trying to get research to better understand what this is. And then from there, some of those conversations do turn into sales conversations later because it's a give and take, right? You're getting information from them and suddenly they want to know a little bit about what you're actually doing, talking to them for 15 minutes, right?
Exactly. But that's what I was trying to say was that like we did that, and I always do that even in a new industry with net new, and I'll go super junior. I'll give a demo to a new hire because I'm going to get pieces of information about the industry, about the company, about the organization. Once I really felt that I had that, then I didn't feel that I had to go to a lookalike organization and start from the same place. Then I would say, I've got enough. There is enough lookalike here. Now I'm jumping 8 levels and bringing this to Sally. That's the EVP of everything, because, or the chief experience or whoever it was, because now I know that there's enough that I genuinely know. And that's when I would jump the queue, not day one. It's like a day 2 activity.
Now let's move into so you get the meeting, and this is definitely going to be helpful for a lot of people I know that are just trying to figure out how to get that first reach out. How do you, just kind of put it bluntly, is like, how do you ask for the money, right? Because so many people are like, I'll just do this for free. And you can't do that forever. So at some point you have to start putting some prices around it. What was your strategy around that? You're going to get an initial POC and charge for that. Some people would have done that for free. So like, what would be your thoughts there in terms of getting those initial, because you're kind of just figuring out the nuts and bolts of pricing yourself, right?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of a few things. So number one, we we tried, we will do demos for free. And our old model used to be like, I would do a custom demo for every meeting I ever went to. When it was the two of us, this is what I still struggle with as we scale. I feel like my output was greater when it was just me sometimes than when we've got a whole team.
Of course, yeah.
But I would go to every meeting. I would, the day before I'd build a custom demo. I'd go to the meeting. I'd do a demo. I'd come back to the office. I'd record a video of me doing the demo to then share with them, to other people. And that was every day. I would do that every single time because I didn't want to lose an opportunity to show what we did. When it comes to a POC, we were just honest. And the most, from a startup perspective, it was helping them understand who we were and that we're trying to grow a business and that we need to, they want us to serve, if they see value, they want us to be able to survive. And we're nothing but transparent. And we everyone that we sold to was kind of invested into the idea that they were part of something. And so whether it was one of our first banks, we told them that like, we need to hire 3 people just to work on this project because we need to like flesh out the deployment model and we need to do X, Y, and Z. And we quoted them at a monthly rate of hiring 3 senior people. And they were like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Like, let's put on we'll sign on. And we said, you got to sign up for like 3 or 4 months because again, we don't want to hire people and fire them. And they were, when they were talking to them in those kind of terms, like they bought into what we did, but this is what it's going to cost so that we can, actually fund what we're doing, survive. But like, we're always going to be returning value to you and you've got an out. But they were, in that case, they were willing to do that. And they kept that going for quite a bit of time. That was a huge amount of money for us. Like to hire our first staff was based off of like a pilot that we were doing with the client. With other groups, we still go in and say, hey, listen, like we would love to do more for you, but like we need to know that we're taking care of, if you become a client, you're going to want us to not overstretch ourselves as well so that that we're there for you. And we would just go in with what was fair. And whenever in doubt, we would have a genuine human to human conversation about like, we're trying to grow something real here. If this is going to be the return that you think it's going to be, what is it? You've got to be willing to put something on the table too. And we'll put way more, we always over service, but we need to know that there's something real here. Because if you're going to, I don't always say this directly, but if they're going to struggle to pay you $30K or $50K for a pilot or a POC, but you think they're going to sign a $500,000 contract, well, you're probably not in the right place then, right? Like, because they're not, if they're going to struggle with giving you any money along the way, then maybe it's not as close as you think it's going to be. So we would just bring it up early often, and we would find ways. If that was problematic, you get creative. You say, great, if you go to contract, I'll knock off the POC cost. If you set these milestones, you define what I got to do to hit that, and then pay me based on milestones. But like, you just can't be, at the end of the day, you're trying to grow a business. You got to put money out there. Otherwise you're hoping for something. And this is my last one on this one is that's probably why we didn't raise any VC till we were, significantly further along than other people. And that was a motivator for us. We didn't want to have to give the business up and ownership up to survive. When we took VC, it wanted to be for scale. And you can survive if you're willing to ask people for money and deliver value on that money. People will pay you or should. We weren't charging $9.99. We were charging a significant amount of money, but it's almost easier for them. Like if you go, it's like, tell them it's like, oh, it's a little license. This is confusing. But when you've got a real price tag on it, that makes you be like, oh, this must be something. Like they know what they're doing. They're charging me real money. It does change the dynamic a bit.
I was going to say, and I bet that radical honesty during the POC process of, hey, we actually need to hire the delivery team that's going to do this thing, helped you during the final negotiation of the actual enterprise license too. So it's like, we know these guys, they're not coming in, because the other traditional way to do it is we're going to get the VC money. We're going to hire all these employees. We're going to kind of fake it as if we're this big company when we're definitely not.
Yeah.
We're going to do the POC, for super low cost. And then we're going to try to gouge them as much as we can on the enterprise license. And they sense that, right? They get that feeling that you're not being genuine. You're going to come into and that's when you get put in procurement hell
Yes.
for a bunch of months, and you lose your business contacts and you get pushed out, and these guys kill you. So I'd love to hear the difference in your procurement process towards the end of these deals versus probably some of the other ones that I've seen in the market, because that can happen.
Yeah. No, procurement, like for us, there's not a lot in procure. Like it's the legal side where because
Always, yeah.
because we're enterprise, we're collecting data that could be restricted, confidential, personal health information, and we might even be the very first cloud vendor they've had, let alone one capturing confidential data. That's our, it's how much liability insurance do we hold? What's, what are all those points? That's the longest part. But we're upfront about pricing as well. So we scope pricing from early on. We have a pretty simple pricing model. It's volume or transaction based. We tell people though that we can't start at 0 transactions because you're an enterprise. So we have a minimum amount that you commit to. And we're pretty upfront about that. And then our pricing is, it gets, more cost effective as they scale up into the millions. And so, at most they're trying to talk about like either, can you give us a little bit of a break on that upfront commitment, or can you give us since we're not committing to more, can you give us a little break downstream? But we're not actually in a pricing war at that point. Like we sign 6-figure deals and it's getting them to close. It's what takes us the longest is if we don't do a good job building the business case with the business and delivering on our results. And that's where we working on our salespeople, our teams to build those relationships. Procurement they're not gouging us on a price because we're not selling, we've been transparent and the business knows at the end of it, we kind of are looking for 1/10 of their return, their expected return in year 1. So, if we've done a good job and they've told us their secrets and we've told us their ours, and they know they're looking to save $5 million this year and we're charging them $500,000, there's not a lot of, we've been totally upfront. And then procurement's like, well, yeah, they said we're fine with the pricing, so let's talk about this thing. And that's, that's truthfully how we go. It's not a pricing conversation for us a lot.
Yeah, and early days, I've had the same experience because we had to play with our pricing so much. And we had one of the big 4 accounting firms actually come to us. And I remember being in this negotiation conversation with some pretty high up executives at one of the big 4 and them saying, why can't we just have a 5-user license here? And we were just straight up and we're like, actually, it would be great for you. Like you would probably be able to run fine and do pretty great things with 5 users. From our perspective, we won't survive if you do that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's I get why that's great for you, but this product, like what we're building here and this vision that you've bought into and you've been great supporters that it actually invested in us, it won't work like that. Like we actually have to be all in. We'll support you. We'll make it well worth your while, but we have to go together into this enterprise vision, and it worked out.
Yeah.
But we had just been honest from a business perspective. It wasn't some sales negotiation.
No,
look, this isn't going to work for our software business. We can't do it.
And that is the fundamental, I hate all the cliches. I'm terrible. I say cliches and I say sayings wrong all the time. Ryan, if he listens to this one day, he's just waiting for me to slip up. But there is a cliche, kind of like, they don't buy, I see I'm going to mess up already, but people buy from people. Like the end of the day, like if I or anyone on my team just was like, here's a price and you got to buy enterprise, like it's not going to happen. But if you've done it right, you've connected with people, you've shown them how this is going to help them, you understand their pain, you understand all that stuff, you were honest along the way, then they get it. They get that we're invested in this. We understand that you're SaaS, and that means that everyone else we're going to all build together and we're going to get all these benefits later on. They also understand, and we would be upfront. We'd say, money today was more important to us than money down the road at the early time, right? Like, so we would be upfront and say like, hey, like we'll give you if you give us more now, we'll give you a crazy deal, because what we're trying to do is figure out how we can hire more people on and build our customer base. But we would have those types of, if you have a good relationship, you're having a conversation both about the product and what we're doing with them, but also the business we're building to support them. And I don't know when that's going to go away, because I'm sure that like Cisco doesn't have that conversation as they're selling some, something to their clients. But like that's not going away for a long time. Like we are, we may be at 50 people now, but like that's still tiny compared to a 100,000 person employee bank. And so being honest about the like, we're building this business is equally as important as what can we do for you. And that will buy you credibility. It'll buy you time when you screw something up. It'll help them understand when they say, well, what's the, where's the portal that I can log on and see all these things? They're like, oh, I haven't built that yet. Uh, but again, it's like, okay, that makes sense. We understand that because I've told them my emphasis right now is building out our training program, and they know that's what I'm working on or the team is working on. So they'll cut you slack, and that is the key. Procurement doesn't care; they don't like you ever. But when the business knows that, they will go to bat, and that's often our procurement play is like, can we just get the business back on the call here? And then they usually shut it down, and they say, let's yeah, we're good with that. Let's move past. I want to go live tomorrow. That's our plan.
That's great. I mean, and to go from where you guys have been at 2 to 50, I'd love to talk about that next step now, which is you and Ryan had done those first few sales in a few different industries, not just in financial services, but then kind of that hiring of those first reps, or did you hire one or two, and how did you approach that? Was it scary? I mean, who were you looking for in those sales reps?
So we've tried a few different ways, and like mistakes on our part, on people we've hired's part, on everybody's part. So it's not
easy.
It's not easy. Yeah. And what the challenge for us, and so I don't want to look back too much, and like I'll look back in a reflective way, but it's not like we made a ton of mistakes. What I can say where we made the mistakes and where we're still correcting for now is, so you heard at the beginning, I talked a little bit of my background. I came as a software developer and then a sales engineer and a marketer and a seller, as a salesperson. So I've got all the skills. And so does Ryan. He's more technical, but he's phenomenal with that transparency, that honesty, the being in front of clients. And we didn't understand where the lines were. We were founders that were technical and business savvy. And so there's like, great, we hired a salesperson, do that. You be the expert in the product and be the expert in the business. And, like if you see an opportunity, jump through and we'll just build it overnight. That doesn't work when you're necessarily hiring your first sales hires. So we had to learn early on how important sales engineering was for our enterprise sales, and really try to focus on what is the right set of skills that each, along that journey people have. We made the similar mistake with either hiring junior people that were good at being BDRs, and getting the meeting, and then didn't know how to build an enterprise relationship and the fact that there's going to be like 9 stakeholders at the table. They were, good at getting the meeting and then wanted to qualify and sell you today, right? Like it's like, boiler room thing. And similarly, we hired some senior people that struggled with, they were used to building a lot of research and doing all that work. And they were like, but you gotta try and talk to 100 people. Right? Like you just gotta, don't worry about that. Just say like, hey, I've got this cool solution. Let's talk. And so what we've learned throughout all that is we needed to define a little bit better, what are the actual skill sets that we need? And at different points, we would have been beneficial to say like, hey, let's bring in solution engineers before we brought in the salespeople. Cause we could have kept doing what we were doing to get the meetings. And it would have been great to have someone else that could have earned their trust at the execution level. Another thing that we didn't do a good job of is this is complex, and we are learning. I described all the things I did before I went to the C-suite team, and it was that confidence that I had in, and Ryan had in, like the conversations, relationships we had. We weren't documenting that. And if I could go back in time, the number one thing I would be doing is not just tracking at the CRM or tracking conversations that exist, but I would have done what I do now, which is like, I just keep a document on innovations team, shared services team, on, retail insurance team, and just make sure that when other people came on board, they understand what do those teams care about? Who are they? What do they care about? How have we interacted with them in the past? And why is it important that I need to develop all of these layers of relationships across the enterprise? And that was the biggest one for us, was people, sorry, I have really long run on sentences, but people that say in the sales side that say they've done enterprise sales, that doesn't mean that they've done the type of sale that we need. And we needed people that sold, we use now the analogy of we need people that have more likely sold services or consultancy than have sold product. Because most products are still, I sell an ERP system or I sell an HR system. And so I get a run list of every VP of HR. I call them up and I say, hey, how you doing? You like your current tool? Ours is 10% cheaper. When's your contract up? Okay, I'll call you back in 6 months. And yes, they've sold enterprise deals. When that goes forward, they've coordinated the legal and everything else. But ours is solution-based selling, and it could be any department. It could be 7 departments and a shared service. And we needed to figure out how to get people knowledgeable to do that. And Ryan and I did it kind of instinctually, kind of through trial and error. And then by not documenting it along the way meant when we hired, we were back to square one with people not knowing how to do it. And yet we were busier than ever before to try and coach them up. And that's been our biggest challenge is backfilling all of that knowledge. Hopefully that makes sense somewhere.
No, it's such an important topic, right? Because there's the first salesperson that you hire is going to be so much more different than the 20th salesperson that you hire, right? There's a huge difference between a process executor and a process builder. And there's this temptation to get a really, really star salesperson from Salesforce or Oracle or an established brand to just come in. They've done enterprise sales. They could do it here. What's different though is that those companies have the key accounts already lined up. They have the process. They have everything everything is documented.
Yeah, the marketing. They have all the resources and assets and videos and absolutely.
It's totally different. What you almost need is another entrepreneur. You need somebody who's going to come in and can take getting rejected heavily and kind of just learn through that pattern of no's and just figure out, okay, this is working, this isn't working. And then they can just kind of go. And that's a totally different person than an executor who's been a star performer, maybe at another company. You're almost not even necessarily looking for somebody who's been destroying quota at different places. You're really looking for somebody that could almost be a product manager or somebody like yourself, right? Who's literally come in with that background and is executed on sales, but it's just a completely different mindset early. It's hard to figure out who that person is.
That's 100%. We're still working out on processes and playbooks now, but that looking back, obviously that's something we could have done. Although there are other times that we had to take the foot off the gas on sales just to deliver, because again, enterprise sales means that you can't, and lack of VC means that you are doing that thing where you're closing the deal at 2 people. You might talk them into it. You might talk them into giving you money. But as it goes closer and closer to production, and then goes into production, they still will cut you some slack, but they want you to be a 20-person company now because they still have needs. And so when we did win those first couple of deals, we had to slow down because we still had to finish off all the back end of what we were doing. But yeah, now we're kind of back out again and we're building pipeline. And yeah, I wish that during that other time we had been documenting more, but now we're trying to come up with the right cadence of getting people. We're building a team, we're hiring them, we're training them, trying to document as we go. But yeah, you can never go back. And I wish I had documented, or I wish that we had always been remote and I would have just recorded every meeting I had ever been in. But that wasn't the case a year ago.
Yeah. And it's also, add documenting to the other 20 different things you've got to do, including that, as an early stage founder, you're invoicing, you're running the back office, you're doing literally everything. So, but it's a critical, as you pointed out, to have that, why you won those deals, what industry insights you led with in those meetings, because that's going to be key if you're connecting with executives. It's not just a new product, right? You have to be offering some type of new insight. That's why they're going to take the second meeting with you and actually buy into that story on FormHero.
Yeah.
I am super curious before we dive into the final segment, a little bit about the profile of the person that did tend to work out. So so somebody with more of a consulting services background tended to be better for you guys. I find that interesting.
Yeah, at least, kind of in our current state. And again, everything is a work in progress. So I will never claim perfection on anything. But it really, again, there's different pieces that have worked differently. And as I said, a lot of it has been putting people in the right position. So, we need to make sure that we had the sales engineering was actually the biggest thing that we found, because that was Ryan and I. We were still, even when we hired some good salespeople, if the bottleneck was they got the meeting, but then they needed someone to come and do all of that technical stuff. And it was still Ryan and I, and we were disappointing because we were put, too thin. We really needed to flesh that side out. But yeah, the profile that we found for where we were, and this is, maybe going back 6 months ago, was people that had come out of more of that side of things. They still had familiarity with selling enterprise, but they also knew that it was a never-ending sale. And for us, that was the biggest thing. As a transaction-based, product platform, we need to build a consensus that builds momentum. Then it gets centralized to an RFP or a single group. Then we close that deal, and then growth means helping them bring more departments and groups on board, or finding them and dragging them along too. Someone that has sold consulting or hours or work like that, you have to find the right person. Because you don't want someone who's like, you need bodies, you need a developer. Like, you don't want that person that did that, but they at least understand that they are always working. They're always understanding what is the next priority. Oh, you got a project coming up in 6 months where you're going to do this. We have a team that does that. They're used to working across the organization to understand what's coming. How could we fit into that? And that is important for a product like ours, where we're selling a platform, not a single solution. So we needed people that thought like that. Whereas I said, someone that sold HR software would kind of treat the organization like they were one entry point, one moment in time. But there's, like, we found other good salespeople that have been sales coaches actually at different organizations, where they've actually helped on building up BDRs and building up other processes, and that's been successful. We found that hiring some people that have been at startups before could be really good, especially if they were at an enterprise startup. And we found that some people that have taken that path from technical into sales has also been really good for us, because they come at it from, that I want to solve your problems first, and then, and that leads to a credibility. So I don't have one persona yet of a salesperson that I can say times 100 now, but we're experimenting.
Yeah, especially with that mindset, right, of actually growing the key relationships in the account is totally different than somebody who's been compensated on new logos. It's just like, I just want to get in the door, get a quick deal, on to the next one. It's a totally different skill set to get in there, build those relationships, and actually have a view of growing a partnership over 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
beyond,
yeah, absolutely. Right? Well, and until I can figure out a way to just get in there, get the logo, and get out, even getting the logo looks exactly the same as that for us. Right? Like, it's a short duration, but it might still be 8 months of, I'm in there, I've got a couple champions, I've built 4 or 5 or 6 different business cases with lines of business. So it's a lot of the same work, even in the get the logo, until we've got, that magic button that they say, oh, here, yeah, we're the, here's your check for $500,000. It's been a week. It's great to, great to do that. I don't know when that's going to come. I wish it would come.
All right. This has been awesome. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've got one last question. I always do want to focus a little bit on kind of getting real with being an entrepreneur, and it's not always, amazing. And we kind of started out that way, as you talked about, but the burning of that disc, which is just an amazing story. That's like such a hard setback. But I guess kind of coming off of that, what would you say to somebody who's just thinking about, I'm going to start a business now? What's been some of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur, but what's been the most rewarding? Like, how would you describe being an entrepreneur to somebody who's maybe younger in Canada or the Toronto area thinking about doing it?
I think, well, I don't know I think the hardest is, for me, it's not the risk. It's not the rejection. And that's just me. So I know that I got a joke that I'm built differently. Ryan has other words that he'd call me about it, but I do, that part I'm okay with. I've always been a risk taker. I've always been that. So it's not, there's nothing around that. I think the hardest part is just, for me, has always been knowing that we have something that could be something. And it's every time that I feel that we're taking steps back in realizing that vision. It's painful. I have that fear of, if it doesn't work out, it's not because of the product, it's not because of whatever, it's because we let it down. Like, we didn't execute well, we didn't make the right decisions. I think a surprising part is how stressful it is, because you're not just trying to sell a product and get rejected. You're also, we went from 2 people to 10 people, and that was terrifying. Like, we got 10 people now. Like, When
Yeah.
you're two people, you're like, you know what, we'll just stop paying ourselves, or you know what, I'll take even more out of the RSP. You know, like I'll find a way to do this. And there's a couple times that, you know, you do that where you're like, oh man, like it just doesn't make any sense, you know, but I'm sure if we could just get out of this valley, we'll succeed. But you can't do that when you've hired 10 people. The only way to do that is like let people go. And we don't want, you know, we never wanted to be in that position. And so the hardest part is, without a doubt, is, you know, you're putting everything in your life into it, and then you are, just like if you have a co-founder, you're trusting, you know, your whole world with them, but then you're trusting into the next four people and the next four people, because you're not a dictator. You're not just, you know, telling them to do whatever. You're bringing them in and trusting that they're part of this family and this growth, but they also have their own needs and their own, you know, they're going to leave, right? Like they want to go on and do their own thing, and that's great. But it is so much of your energy will keep going away from, you know, you started with this singular focus, and now it's like, I got to take care of you, and you're fighting, and I want to, you know, you want to be 4 steps ahead than where we are, and I got to communicate better. That is the hardest part, is balancing. It's, you know, it was hard enough getting it started, but scaling it and is by far, at the moment, maybe it's just the part we're in, feels harder than getting it started initially. But you also know that like every time you have a success at the scaling part, you can watch it take off, where it doesn't work quite like that at the beginning. You get a conversation, you're like, woo. But now it's like, if I get something right, I know for the next 3 months, a whole team is going to go kill it on their objectives. But it's hard as all heck. It's also rewarding. Yeah. Like I can't even, you know, I talk to my in-laws, I talk to my friends, my family, and the same that we talked about before about the executive. They're like, wait, you met with the head of whatever? And it just is like, yeah, I have this opportunity to talk to and do some of the coolest stuff that I couldn't have imagined, right? I'm on a podcast. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to go talk to the head of technology for, you know, an insurance company. I'm going to go talk to a VC that is also the VC of like brands that I know and that even my mom knows, you know. And so the most rewarding part is that like you get to define your own destiny. And for some people that is crippling and terrifying, and for other people it's like, yeah, I want to do that. Even if I crash and burn, I want to do that. And that's kind of where I come from. But yeah, I don't know. That's a weird advice to give, but that's where, you know, that's where I'm at. And then I would always say to people, make sure you build a business. Ryan and I are big advocates to any startup that says, if it's real, people should pay you for it today. You know, unless you're building like a supercomputer that needs $10 billion to find out if it's even going to work. If it's software, if it's service, someone will pay you money for it before you go raise VC, and spend more time on that upfront. That's my other thing I say to everybody is like, don't be afraid to ask for money, because you're asking for money for the VC. So like ask for money from the client, you know, it's the same thing.
That's the thing, right? It's like no problem asking for $2 million for the VC, but when it comes for the big banking client, oh my God.
And I've coached a lot of people on that. Like, can I ask for, do you think like 5,000 is too much? And I'm like, if it was me, I would be asking for 75,000. Like, you know, for like, what are you going to do? You're going to work, 5 of you are going to work for 3 months. You know, like what, you just got to convince them of why that $75,000 is going to get them so much more than them spending it on their own people. Like you'll kill yourselves for 24 hours a day for 3 months, you know, for that. So anyway, yeah.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. Loved it.
I really appreciate it. Happy to do it anytime. And, you know, as you can see, I can always talk.